It is a pleasure to welcome our distinguished speakers, delegates, and participants from across the world to the third and final day of Symbiosis International University's conference on the internationalization of higher education. I'm Suchetana, and I'll be your MC for this session. This session is titled Learners and TNE, Cultural Adaptation, Academic Expectations, and Employability. As transnational education reshapes the national character of education systems, this session explores the complex phenomenon of how global programs impact the individual learner. University leaders and researchers today will analyze the implications of TNE on students navigating the shift between diverse academic cultures and Western pedagogical standards. The discussion focuses on unpacking the practical challenges of cultural adaptation and the evolving academic expectations of students within international hubs and special education zones. Furthermore, the panel will examine how these cross-border collaborations enhance student employability and professional mobility in an increasingly borderless global market. This session aims to share best practices for supporting learners as they transition through the evolving global education ecology. Before we begin, a few housekeeping announcements to help ensure the smooth running of the conference. Kindly keep your mobile phones on silent during all sessions. Each session will be followed by a Q&A segment. We request you to keep your questions ready. Kindly refrain from recording the session as it is being live streamed on YouTube. I request the moderator, Ms. Amrita Roykar, and speakers of this session to take the stage. Ms. Amrita Sadarangani, Chief Academic Services Officer, University of York, Mumbai. Dr. Matthew Wittenstein, Education Leadership Program, University of New Mexico, USA. Dr. Nilesh Berad, Joint Director, Maharashtra State Faculty Development Academy. Dr. Gayatri Vasudevan, Chief Impact Officer at Sambhav Foundation. Mr. Ravin Mirchandani, Chairperson, Adore Patron India, AccuSensors Limited, Australia. Thank you. Ms. Ruikar is Head of International Admission and Promotions at Symbiosis International University, where she leads internationalization efforts, student recruitment, and global outreach. She plays a key role in strengthening international collaborations and enhancing the experience of global students across SIU campuses. She is also closely involved in strategy and outreach for the university's Dubai campus, supporting its global expansion. An alumna of Symbiosis Law School, Pune, she is currently pursuing a PhD on factors influencing international students' choice of India as a study destination. I now hand over to Ms. Roykar.
Good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to all of you all today. It is a pleasure to welcome you all to today's session on learners and transnational education, on cultural adaptability, academic expectations, and employability. Over the past 2 days, we've had multiple debates and discussions on transnational education, policies surrounding it, regulatory frameworks, and the quality of education that is imparted in these IBCs and a whole lot of other aspects. Today's session is going to be very interesting because we will be talking about the cultural adaptation, both from the students as well as faculty and the institution as a whole. We will also be talking about faculty readiness, responsiveness, and flexibility in these IBCs. And of course, one of the most important topics on employability outcomes, that whether students who undergo transnational education, do they really have an edge over those who don't? And do these students who undergo transnational education, do they get the ROI that they have expected? In a very increasingly interconnected world and a borderless world, education is no longer confined to national borders. Students and learners move across borders, across cultures, and across diverse learning environments and gain what is transnational education, which is extremely transformative as it is complex. As these learners step into new environment, the question of adaptability becomes very pertinent. Adaptability to the new culture, adaptability to the new academic expectation, and develop new ways of thinking and learning. in this panel today with my eminent panelists. We will be discussing on various perspectives on cultural adaptation, institutional adaptability, faculty readiness, and employability outcome, which will form the core of today's discussion. I will take a quick minute to introduce each of my panel members. Dr. Amrita Sadrangani. Dr. Amrita Sadrangani is the Chief Academic Services Officer of the University of York, Mumbai, where she leads academic strategy, research support, and student success for the university's new international campus. She previously served as Senior Director and Head of Global Research Alliances at Ashoka University and has over 2 decades of experience in higher education, research leadership, and global engagement across India and beyond. Welcome, ma'am. Dr. Matthew Wittenstein. Dr. Matthew is an Associate Professor of Educational Leadership and Policy and Program Coordinator of the Education Leadership Program at the University of New Mexico and Senior Research Fellow at Claremont Graduate University. His research examines immigrants in higher education and international educational experiences alongside comparative work on higher education quality, organization, and governance. More recently, he explores the role of higher education in sustainable development and global citizenship education. He is the co-editor of Palgrave Macmillan's series, South Asian Education Policy, Research and Practice, Associate Editor of Comparative Education Review, and co-author of the Bloomsbury textbook, Comparative and International Education and Introduction. Welcome, Matthew. Dr. Nilesh Berard is the Joint Director at the Maharashtra State Faculty Development Academy, MSFDA, leading faculty development, governance reforms, and academic transformation, aligned with NEP 2020. With over 25 years in higher education, he has contributed to curriculum design and institutional quality enhancement across universities. An alumnus of Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, he is an accredited management teacher by All India Management Association and has guided 12 PhD scholars. He also brings international teaching experience at the Savitribai Phule Pune University Dubai campus and is known for engaging sessions that inspire innovation-driven and transformative approaches to education. Welcome, sir. Dr. Gayatri Vasudevan is a senior development leader with over 25 years of experience in labor, skilling, and livelihood systems in India. She is the founder of Samba Foundation and has led initiatives that build sustainable models for education, employability, and entrepreneurship. She previously worked with the International Labour Organization, shaping her expertise in labour policy and gender transformative skilling. Dr. Gayatri has served on advisory boards for the Ministry of Labour and Employment, UIDAI, and Niti Aayog. She has authored around 30 publications on labour, employment, and gender and received several recognitions, including Forbes India's Social Entrepreneur of the Year and Niti Aayog's Women Transforming India Award. Welcome, ma'am. Last but definitely not the least, Mr. Ravi Mirchandani completed his MBA in Business Administration from Queensland University of Technology, Brisbane. Presently, Raveen manages a business that spans India and Australia, focusing on the road and clean energy sectors, that is carbon-free mobility, as well as road safety solutions. Raveen is a member of the board of directors of Adore Powerton and Quen Chargers, as well as AccuSenses Limited. He spends his time between India and Australia. Raveen is chair for the Indo-Australian Chamber of Commerce for West India, is co-chair of the Chamber's India Infrastructure Industry CEO panel. He is also vice president of the Indo-French Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Ravin is host of the Energizing India podcast, which focuses on the energy transition sector, and also part of the investment committee of an early stage fund that focuses on enabling startups in the energy transition sector that are solving unique problems. Ravin has a private pilot's license and very occasionally takes his cycle out for a pre-dawn run up a hill. I'm sure the location today is perfect for you to go cycling. My first question is to Dr. Amrita. Ma'am, when we talk about cultural adaptation, there's often a term which is referred to, which is the U-curve of adaptation. So when students travel across borders to gain transnational education, they often undergo a U-curve of adaptation, where first is the so-called honeymoon phase, where they're extremely excited about this new life, this new teaching, this new way of learning that they're getting into. The second phase is what they go through is called the cultural shock, where homesickness sets in. They're adjusting to this new environment. And the third, of course, is where the reality sets in, where they have to accept and adjust with this new life, the new situation that they're into, new ways of teaching and learning. So coming from this, of course, ma'am, transnational education, what we are discussing today, refers to higher education program where learners are situated in a country different from where the the home university is located. Yesterday in our inaugural session, Dr. Kaustub also mentioned that there are around 19 IBCs applications in India and 7 in Maharashtra, and University of York is of course one of them. So my question to you is, as the University of York establishes its Mumbai campus, students are navigating multiple academic cultures simultaneously. What are the most significant adjustments that students need to make when engaging with Western pedagogical approaches, and how can institutions better support these students through this transition?
Thank you so much for that question and for having me here. It's been an amazing conference, and I've had the privilege to have amazing discussions with many here. So the most significant shift is from a performance-oriented model of learning to a participation-oriented one. And what does that mean? So it's about right answers, shifting from the right answer to critical questioning. So many students come from systems where correctness and exam performance dominate. However, the York pedagogy will reward ambiguity, argumentation, and independent thinking. So the adjustment for students here is being comfortable not knowing and still contributing. From teacher-led to student-owned learning. So there is an expectation to pre-read, to challenge ideas, and to drive discussion, with the adjustment being about voice, confidence, and intellectual risk-taking. The other aspect is from individual performance to collaborative learning. Group work across cultures, disciplines, and perspectives. Therefore, it's about negotiation, listening, and peer accountability. And finally, from implicit rules to transparent but unfamiliar expectations. So referencing academic integrity, office hours, feedback loops, and therefore decoding an entirely new academic culture. So, however, if we expect students to adapt to this, we have to actually design for this adaptation and not leave it to chance. So what are the sort of practical interventions that will take place? Front-loading academic culture, which means not just how to learn, which is about how to learn, not just what to learn, and what critical thinking looks like in practice. Have low-stakes discussions before graded ones, so you're scaffolding that stepping into this system, and structured speaking opportunities. Our faculty become cultural translators, so making expectations explicit and normalizing struggle and uncertainty. Peer learning ecosystems, being mentored, and having learning communities, and assessment design that provides early formative feedback and iterative assignments. So the goal is not about assimilating into a Western model, but building students' ability to move fluently across academic cultures.
I think your importance on performance to participation and teacher-led to student-led, I think is something that is extremely important. My next question is to Dr. Matt. Dr. Matthew, as more global institutions establish campuses in India, and we've mentioned earlier that there are about 19 IBCs that have applied to establish campuses in India. How do you see the challenge of balancing institutional identity with local culture and educational context? In your view, what does meaningful cultural adaptability actually mean for foreign university operating in such a diverse country like India?
This is a really good question. So, it's a really critical, important, and impossible question to get just right, isn't it? Because this balance of institutional identity is grounded in social context, both local and global, right? So my opening response to this meaningful question is, what does India actually desire from foreign universities? And what do foreign institutions desire in opening a campus in India? As someone who spent a large part of my career doing research in higher education institutions in South Asia and in India, I've continued to push and advocate for more empirical research on higher education in India. And to me, this is a slight derivation from your question, but I feel like we first need to even understand what is higher education in India about? It's an exciting, complex system which is very under-researched. And I feel like you and I might have been talking last night about the fact that sometimes one of the exciting things, there are so many exciting things to me about having spent my career doing work in South Asia, and particularly in India, but often people are in a hurry. And so while the branch campuses are already here, we really need to take a step back while we're also transacting the work that we're doing and say, okay, what is this about? What directions are we headed in? And I urge people to participate in this new organization if you're a policymaker or a researcher that studies, or a practitioner that studies higher education. Several of us in this room were at the International Higher Education Research Conference. That's part of the International Higher Education Research Network, IHE. It's a great thing to look up online. I see some of my friends like Priya and Eldo who were there, and some other folks. We really need to understand more about, critically, what is Indian higher education. I think if we begin understanding more of that and really deeply studying that, that will help us better understand how we get to your really important question. Until then, we're missing some of the critical answers that will really help us do the best work that we can. And I know that sounds like a very academic answer, but the reality is doing that research in concert with the practice and the policy making that we do, we really need all of us as partners to work together to do this. So just a couple of more thoughts. So there are, just the last thing I'll say on this is, there are bountiful opinions and reports about Indian higher education. There are the typical people that are often invited that have been involved in it for many years, that are seasoned senior folks. And there are so many emerging scholars that are beginning to work together. And I urge us to connect with them and bring them and have them speak even more at meetings in concert with other policymakers, because I think they have a really good pulse on what's going on and how we can move forward.
Thank you, Matthew. I think having said that, platforms like this, where we have conferences on internationalization of higher education, provide the perfect place and platform for scholars and thinkers and researchers to come together and debate and discuss over what you just said, is what is higher education as a whole for a diverse country like India. My next question is to Dr. Nilesh. So in fact, yesterday, me and one of my friend who's doing a course at the Harvard Law School, we were discussing about the various teaching and learning pedagogies and how they are different from the teaching and learning pedagogies that faculty members undergo in institutions in India vis-a-vis those what she is looking at when she's studying at Harvard. So my question stems from that is, given your work with MSFDA and alignment with NEP 2020, how can faculty training programs strike a balance between global best practices brought in through transnational education and the local priorities of India's higher education system?
Thank you, Amrita. This is a really nice gathering and sitting with all these people. Now, while answering this particular question, it is more on the balancing the global best practices with local priorities. As far as India is concerned, it is a vast area. Every 50 kilometers, we have got change in language, change in texture, change in tone and everything. So adopting anything directly is not a solution. Rather, it is more on the contextual adoption and making it relevant with Indian context. That is, I will take it as it's a global approach. Think globally, act locally. So it's a global approach. We can go ahead with it. First, training program should adopt the global framework where the global best practices are critically examined and can be utilized in Indian context. Right now, the practices which are being shared is more on the chalk and talk method. When we are going to focus students on the research-based methods which are being prominently used in foreign countries, whether our students are really prepared for all that. At MSFDA, we have started with such kind of initiatives with help of IIT Mumbai, wherein we are giving them the IIT Mumbai is guiding the faculties They are going to the local level. They are asking them to do the research on local problems and learn from them. And probably that learning is giving a very good edge hold on the students. And second, as it is mentioned in NEP 2020, we are more focused on equity, inclusion, and multidisciplinary learning. And as I mentioned that, our majority of the chunk is coming from the rural part. Majority, few things are there which are specifically there for the Mumbai and all other related cities. But majority chunk are coming from the rural part. So their structure, their understanding is going to be very different. Otherwise, these foreign countries, they will attract probably those who are having the paying capacities and all, but probably cream will come it or not, it is another question. Even the same thing which happens with IIMs also. So that is more at the same time level of readiness about to absorb the international practices, whether we talk about the differential teaching approaches like experiential learning, experimental learning and all, whether our students are really that much capable enough, and first and foremost, whether my teachers are really capable enough to practice those things. If they are at MSFDA, we are more focused on the making them practice and giving them the different pedagogical approach. Earlier, before NEP, there is more on the summative examinations are there. Now there are formative assessment. Formative assessment, giving the feedback to the students is also important. Here, probably the classes of the students which is having a strength of more than 100. For a faculty, giving that kind of feedback to each and every student is again another challenge. So we all need to learn all these things from this. Then third, faculty feedback and hopes that overcome the assessments. What kind of loops we are going to work it out on that. And how that feedback we are going to. So it essence in the more on the balance lies in anchoring global excellence within the local relevance and ensuring that TNE becomes the more enable to India's higher education transformation rather than the parallel system. Otherwise, it will happen that the foreign university will be working on very different aspect and Indian university will be working very on this. So we need to merge so as there should be a cohesiveness across all the systems. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I think your point on think globally and act locally, which is local, is extremely important. And as they say, a large population of India actually lives in the villages and in the rural areas. So when you develop the rural areas, that's when India will be a truly developed nation. Coming to my next question is to Dr. Gayatri. Dr. Gayatri, from your experience working at the intersection of skilling and livelihoods, how does cultural adaptability, especially students coming from transnational education environments, translate into real employability outcomes?
So first, thank you for inviting me. And you know, when Dr. Neeta invited me, I felt a bit like an outsider. So I'm going to put the perspective of, you know, I shouldn't even be in this room, but I got invited to the dining table. So welcome to eating on the thali. So let me put it in another way, right? We've been seeing this change over the last 20, 30 years. So if you look at the 1990s, it was a very Indian school, Indian education. That is, my generation didn't have anything. The closest we had, we used to call it, schools which were run by the church. There were no private schools. There were very, very few. There were a handful. You know, DPS was probably one of the few private schools which were there. So the schooling changed. Universities, the symbiosis, and they were just coming up then. Otherwise, everybody went into a particular kind of universities and moved out. The change is evident today. Higher education is there everywhere. Higher education for the poor does not look like this. It is an absent system. Sorry to say this, there are about 1,000 universities, and those are the people I largely deal with. Is really we're imposing on them. When we're saying NEP also, I'm not clear whether we mean NEP there, I hesitate to say it, but let me call it out. I know it's being recorded, but I'd say it. I felt very sorry when I went to Nellore. When I went to the university had 30,000 students. The campus was huge. It had 1,000 students, and the professors were struggling to see what is NEP. They said, no, we have to do quantum and AI. And I was like, really? Why? Why do you need to do that? But that's the situation. So for me, the relevance here actually was, the more I thought about it, is the cultural adaptation. So as you come in, there's a lot of discussion on place-based. Sorry, I'm going to take the US as an example, but I think the disconnect has been that the place-based development has not happened. And therefore, the disconnect that we're seeing today, in my opinion, has really sharpened at a political level. So the economic and political level implications of it are very huge. So if universities come in, those students' ability to relate to the field is very important. And that is difficult. So just stay with me on this, right? You're coming through roads. The roads are broken. There are going to be people who are, and it's not about this. It's at every level. It's an Indian problem, right? I mean, IIT Bhubaneswar is supposed to be the specialist for civil engineering. And I've had conversations with them is, why are roads bad? Right? Simple. That's what you're supposed to fix, potholes, really. But it's a complex phenomenon. It's not simple. And I don't want to blame X or Y or Z, but these are place-based solutions becomes very important because class is going to be the predominant factor here. So if they're not going to solve place-based, actually we are going to have tensions. And I think those tensions are cultural tensions, there are social tensions, and plain green jealousy. You know, and that's normal human. So I think that's one thing I'd like to state on the table, that as you design curriculum, as you design ability to actually deal with the locality in a sense, that's why I call it place-based interventions are very important in education. And which also applies to government colleges, government schools. You can't be teaching them where it's not applicable in place-based. And today, technology makes it easy for us. Knowledge is available. Application is what we all need to learn. The other thing I would say is, you know, it's so amazing and refreshing when you come here. It's just like, you know, you're in a different world. Can we bring these assessment systems to really, really look at what the Indian systems are struggling with, the Indian universities? How does that exchange happen, right? I mean, I was so fascinated when both of you were talking. When you said that it's the pedagogy, it's the scaffolding, it is amazing. But what does it mean to a faculty who is, pardon me to say, maybe in Osmanabad or in Nellore, what does it mean to them is important. The other last point I'll make and stop is that there is a class issue, which means employability, right? These are people who are going to go set up businesses, work in businesses. Are they even going to be able to relate to the people who they are going to employ is going to be important. Yesterday, as I was having dinner, one of the things that somebody said is, this is like a family that will go. That will go completely because they cannot relate. So the moment you don't relate to somebody, you're just going to, you know, you lose that element, and it's going to happen with technology, platformization, flexibilization of labor. It is going to happen. So and let me stop here, but just conclude by saying that it is critical for us to think of the place and think at least 50 kilometers what positive change can be there, which is a museum for the rest to copy. That's the need. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gayatri. I think it's ironic that you're speaking about bad roads, because I'm sure while you're coming to this university, I think, you know, the roads are pretty bad. But we've been after the local corporation, telling them that we will, you know, make the roads better. They're neither doing it themselves, neither allowing us to do it. So it's, yeah, pretty ironic. But I think your point on place-based problems and how universities should design curriculums and solve the local problems is something that we all need to ponder upon. My next question is to Mr. Ravin, me and Ravin have shared stage earlier, and happy to share stage with him again. My question to you is that, given your experience working across India, Europe, and Australia, what differences do you observe in graduates who've had international or transnational education exposure compared to those who haven't?
Thanks, Amrita. That's a very good question. I'm also on the advisory board of Deakin University's campus in India, and that's exactly what we're struggling with as well. But an aside first, Gayatri, to answer your question on why the roads don't get built, it's because of corruption. The road needs 3 layers, 2 layers get built, and the top layer ends up being in the pockets of the people who make the decisions, and that's just the sad reality of India. And I'm in the road sector, so I can say that from a very heartfelt place. It's quite amazing to come here, Amrita. I hadn't realized how big symbiosis was, and therefore I made that very big faux pas when we were on the panel together last time, talking about how symbiosis might be able to benefit from transnational education, when in fact might be the other way around. You will be benefiting other universities by exporting all of the experience you have here. I want to just take a 30-second segue. I started at Symbiosis. In fact, I went to BMCC to study commerce. And I found the environment so toxic that after the second year, I went to Symbiosis, which was then run by a very smart, incredibly intelligent, and beautiful principal called Veena Yadav. And she was perplexed that I wanted to move from what was considered the best university for commerce to Symbiosis. And she said, well, if you want to, we'll do it. And then BMCC was perplexed about giving me what was the NOC to leave, which was a very complex process, but I was so happy to come to Symbiosis. I did the Bachelor of Commerce, and then I left immediately, as students did in the 90s without work experience, to do an MBA in Australia. And the reason I did that was because the United States rejected my visa twice. It was 1992, and George Bush, the senior, was president, and they were going through their first, right-wing, let's reduce the people coming at that point. And so I had this amazing gift from the universe to go to Australia and do my MBA. I found that my MBA in Australia taught me exactly what my BCom in India taught me. The subjects were similar, the content was similar. But it was a radically different approach. And so to Nilesh's point and also Amrita's point, what was different there? In my Indian college degree, I had to make sure that the balance sheet balanced, the numbers were right, the answers were correct, and we were working the algorithm of which questions repeat themselves every 3 years, and so that we had the right answers, right? I was trying to do that in Australia and failing, and the lecturer said, I don't really want to know what's in the textbook, I want to know how you're going to apply it. And suddenly it became so much easier, and I ended up coming second in the whole university cohort because my mind shifted. And I'm not saying that to prove the intelligence of the person, I'm just saying it's a very different concept of how students will be taught. And I think it's a gift to be able to be taught that one thing which we don't do in India, and that is curiosity. The question is why. I go to many panels and they say, why don't we have products in India? Why is it that you get AI products in the US and all the Indians are writing code for Microsoft products? The truth is we don't teach curiosity. We don't teach engineers to break the watch and build it again to understand how it works. Everyone is working a system which is, let me get to a college, let me get out there having mugged up the answers, and let me get the highest salary I can get, and then I'll get the best marriage, and then it's this formula that we're all constantly working on in India. Success comes from identifying what you really enjoy doing and then following that 100% all your career, right? Because if you're happy, you will always be successful. That needs curiosity. So I would say that students who come out of university anywhere in the world come out with one quality, and that's hope. And the obligation of universities is to mix hope with curiosity. And so if we're going to talk about transnational education, it is about, and just like Nilesh said, not two different systems where they're going to be very confused, being taught one system overseas and one system in India. What do transnational or international students have as an advantage over others? It comes from this experience of having a completely different culture the moment you get off the plane. And Amrita, you talked about this homesickness. Yeah, it's absolutely right. But you get off a plane, whether it's in Bristol or whether it's in Ann Arbor or in Brisbane, and you suddenly need to work the system about how the metro works or the bus works and how you go to Selfridges and buy oranges, and everything is different and complex. You might have a girlfriend or a boyfriend and the culture is so different. And you're constantly learning learning a skill set, opening your mind, connecting different dots in your mind that you would not do in your comfort zone in your domestic education, right? And so what that brings out is the ability to ask why, the ability to merge with different cultures, cultures, particularly if you're working in a multinational. So my day starts in Australia at 6 a.m. I spend a majority of my midday in India, and then it ends with the US or Europe, right? And the thinking is so radically different in each. You think Australia and America are similar, but they're radically opposite in their thinking. And so if we are going to a globalized world, then students who had an international or transnational education have that ability to maneuver the gray and understand the different cultures and therefore be incredibly successful in a globalized context. And yeah, I reckon I would encourage anybody who is considering that, because that is the skill set that you will need in the future.
Thank you, Ravin. I think emphasis on curiosity. I do agree that the education system sometimes in India can be very straitjacketed, and students who engage into transnational education really get to witness a very different and a very new culture. So, in fact, just to give you an example, we have students at our English Language Teaching Institute who come and learn German with us. So, we take them on a short, like a 10-day tour to Germany, and we grade them on the experience that they've experienced there. So how do they book a train ticket, or how do they go and buy groceries. So we actually grade them on that rather than making them go through a written exam. So I think experiencing a new culture is something that's really important and really goes a long way. Coming back to you, Dr. Amrita, my question to you is again on cultural adaptability, and we've spoken a lot over the past 2 days. We've spoken a lot about how universities shift their campuses, and we've spoken a lot about branch campuses. But I think what I would like to also put on the table is, when students cross borders and engage into transnational education. Giving you an example, at our Dubai campus, we have students from Rwanda who've traveled all the way from Rwanda to Dubai to gain education from an Indian higher education university in a country like Dubai. So there are 3 different cultures. So the Rwandan culture, the Dubai culture, and the Indian education system. So coming from that, you're expanding in Bombay. And in an emerging education hub like Bombay, students are effectively studying abroad while being at home. So how does this hybrid model change the way they engage in learning, faculty, and even with their own aspirations?
Thank you for that. So what this model does is it removes the physical mobility barrier, but it doesn't remove the need for cultural mobility. And I want to segue a bit into what this means for the institution, because that is our focus at the moment before we receive our first cohort of students. And in my role as being responsible for all external engagement and all student services, how do we actually bring the global experience, the York experience, into a context where the expectation from our students and their families is very Indian also, right? So as Ravin said, we have, you want that pathway of degree and salary and all of that, and you still want a global education, which doesn't actually cater to that. And we know that people ideally want all of the above. So what this means is that we're toggling between global and local on a very constant and consistent basis as we establish the institution and as we go into delivery for our first batch of students. So learning becomes more contextual and global, and so students are exposed to global frameworks and local realities. So what does that mean for us? How are we implementing? For example, if you go to the York website, you have a York student career journey, and we're bringing that to India, but with India, we're adapting it to Mumbai, right? So what does that mean in terms of the skills we impart and the platforms we use, but how are we engaging with industry? And that looks quite different here. And actually, we're already hearing from York that, well, they'd like to borrow some of the ideas we have here in implementing that. So what is the outcome for the student is stronger applied thinking. Faculty relationships become a lot more dynamic, much less hierarchical, much more about dialogue. And students may, of course, initially hesitate to transition to that. So one thing I've heard in my previous roles with other international universities is that the Indian students and students from other major sending countries will always be hesitant to stand up in a classroom and speak. The Indian students are the quickest to turn that around and to shift. So, the support is so that's where we also come to the point that Dr. Nilesh made. It's about faculty, accessibility, and mentoring and supporting faculty to do that. Aspirations are expanding for a student, whether they're going to an Indian institution, whether they're going to a branch campus, whether they're going overseas. So they don't see themselves as only local or global. And how do we deal with that? They become multi-local, right? They're globally employable and very locally grounded. I think someone said yesterday in a panel, so it's about them being successful locally here, but at some point, being able to take their talent and their experience and going wherever they wish to. And what does this mean for identity formation? It's about saying, where do I belong academically and professionally? And it's about supporting students through that uncertainty. So I'll stop there and look forward to more comments and discussion.
Thank you. I think what you said is very correct, where Indian parents and students have very rigid expectations when it comes to salary and employability. My next question is coming back to you, Dr. Matthew. You've written about global citizenship and sustainable development in higher education. So how can institutions, meaning students as well as faculty members, in these transnational campuses integrate these ideas into their teaching and learning while still remaining very relevant to the local student realities and aspirations?
It's a great question, and you have so many ideas, Dr. Amrita, that were linkable into what this question really is sort of about. So for me, there's so much fertile ground upon which we can frame and ground these ideas of global citizenship education and education for sustainable development. And I don't know if folks are familiar within the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly there's a target 4.7 that talks about these two dimensions, especially as it relates to a variety of social dimensions like gender equality, human rights, et cetera. And to me, in this sort of transnational higher education enterprise, what an exciting opportunity that we have here. There's boundless opportunities to frame and guide the work that can be done, and I would say should be done in relation to that. So what I find most compelling about transnational higher education in relation to higher education institutions is this ability to consider the local to the global and everywhere in between. I like how you said locally grounded also, and thinking about how does that situate ourselves within the set of the polycrisis that we have with all of the complex challenges that we have, right? So one of the best opportunities for sort of interconnecting this international institution, the branch campus, with local communities, and in this idea of perhaps bridge building, is to engage in sustainable, I can't even say the word correctly, development as sort of a core dimension of mission and vision. And my guess is some of them may be thinking about this, perhaps some of them have grounded their ideas inside of this. But so this connects so intricately with the first question that you asked, actually, in regard to balancing institutional identity and local culture and in developing adaptability, right? So how exciting could it be if local context and international higher education develop clear issues and dilemmas they'd like to focus on through inquiry and practice and preparation of students and graduates? We've heard so many interesting panels in the last few days that talk about the different types of programs at institutions. And my guess is some of them are grounded in considering some of these realities of both financially what's viable, what types of jobs are viable, but also I urge campuses to think about these ideas of, especially as it relates to preparing people for this world that we live in. So the last few years, I've been working on better understanding sort of these connections between global citizenship education and education for sustainable development. And I invite you to take a look, if you have time, at an article that I worked on with my research team in the journal Prospects, which is one of the UN's journals. And we look at all of the, over the last decade, all of the journals that talk about global citizenship education and education for sustainable development, and how they sort of engage that both institutionally in terms of practices in class. And it could really perhaps be a helpful tool it's just sort of it's not the sexiest article in the world, but it gives a really good grounding of what institutions have been doing over the last decade as it relates to these things in terms of theory and conceptualization of these two, GCE and ESD, but also the practices, the strategies, and the mechanisms for actually calling it forth. And just one more thought here. So, with the current dilemma in which higher education often sees themselves as this all-knowing versus seekers of knowledge sort of framing, one of the things that I've been working on with some of my colleagues lately is really thinking about how do we change this paradigm from we know everything to let's actually seek knowledge within the communities that we're working in. I like how you talked about within like the 50-kilometer radius. I'd like to know more about that. Like, what are the problems in local communities? How do we actually invest in those issues, right? Because typically those problems are not created locally. Often they're created, unfortunately, by places like my country, right? A lot of times from that global to the local. But if we really were to frame higher education, these branch campuses, and thinking about ESD and GCE, there's a lot more opportunity to think about the responsibility that higher education and higher education institutions and their stakeholders have in this work. I agree that, at some point, the financial aspect of higher education is it's a marketized enterprise to a point. However, that doesn't mean we can't actually care about our world. And the responsibility that higher education institutions have, especially as we're thinking about moving into communities and I don't know if that's the right way of thinking about it, but extending into communities as branch campuses. How are we really thinking about our responsibility as that campus in concert with the community? How do we bring in and bridge the knowledges from the local community to better understand the problems? And to me, that creates a much more, we'd have a much better chance at solving, because it's very difficult to solve these polycrisis issues, right? But I think we'd have a much better opportunity at doing that, and it would be much more exciting. It would lead to a lot of the types of learning you're talking about, which I think would be much more natural. Same with what Mr. Ravin was talking about, actually. It would be a much more natural extension of that type of learning that would be able to occur.
May I quickly make a point? So the University of York's mission of public good is something that we are very committed to extending here and, well, translating to Mumbai and what that looks like. For example, the university has a community center called The Place in York, which works with disadvantaged school children to bring them up to university readiness. And that is, so again, in my role as external engagement, we're looking into how that translates into our neighborhood in Powai. And, so that is a commitment that we're making also to initiate clinics. So for example, business students will go out and solve small business problems in the community. And these are the initiatives we're taking to be able to then feed back into the type of locally grounded but global learning frameworks.
I think when Dr. Matthews spoke about solving local problems and engaging with local communities, so Symbiosis runs a SCOPE, which is a Symbiosis community outreach program and extension activities. So where we've adopted 35 villages in and around the university campus, where we do conduct lectures on legal literacy, a mobile medical van, lectures on innovation, entrepreneurship. So we try to engage with these local communities to ensure that our students understand these local problems and try to solve, as you said, try to solve these local problems for these local communities.
And one last thing. Based on what you were just saying and your comment, and actually a lot of what you said, the ways in which learning will happen in sort of the perhaps more Western orientations of how we don't as much teach to the test, although that's happening more in K-12 than it used to. the ways in which learning happens here can connect in ways that we often do. So perhaps those two, the branch campus sort of philosophies of pedagogy, in concert with the local knowledges, will actually create some very powerful situations of solving those problems.
Coming to Dr. Nilesh, you spoke about how cohesive and how parallel faculty teaching in these Western universities vis-a-vis faculty teaching in Indian universities, and how they need to be parallel and there shouldn't be any divide. So coming from that, my question to you is, how do you see faculty development evolving in response to transnational education, particularly in terms of digital learning, interdisciplinary thinking, and global collaboration?
Going ahead with that, probably as Samrita ma'am has said, when your students are working for the admissions, they won't ask anything about faculty. Their first and last question is, what are the placements? So they are more going to the Z point, rather understanding A to Y the process. And faculty is playing the key role, because all these infrastructure is a hardware, and good faculties are softwares. So in this transnational education policies and working with this with different cultures, going ahead and learning this thing physically won't be possible. So the first and foremost important thing is, which is essential, is digital and hybrid learning. Now in our case, digital learning is that probably those who are experienced with NPTEL and SWAYAM, they are knowing that they switch on the things and they do their work. And finally, they will appear for the examination. So we are more on the gaining and omitting and getting the examination pass. And here, faculty development plays a very dominant role. Now, when faculty digital and hybrid learning ecosystem is going to be there, so it is more on the technological enabled learning pathways, wherein instead of getting into the only one kind of tutoring or just a video lecture, if it has been more on the gamification platform or faculty involvement platform, so wherein a student or faculty will learn out of that. So that is going to give them the edge over. At MSFDA now we are developing our LMS completely based on the gamification platform, where unless and until faculty's involvement is not there, it will not work. So it's more on the faculty will be trained not only in the content delivery, but digital pedagogy, learning analytics, and AI-assisted teaching. The emphasis is shift from teaching with technology. Rather just, right now also, whenever your smart boards are there and PowerPoint slides are there, faculties are more just to prepare the PowerPoint slides, showcase it. Some of them are literally reading it. Technology is there, but how to use it? So there you need to have whatever the students are saying. Some of the time one of my faculty used to read. One of my students says, sir, we are quite literate enough to read out whatever has been written. What we want is whatever is not written over there. Read between the lines, how the applications will be there. And these are the things which one need to understand. Going ahead to the second point, that is the interdisciplinary and outcome-oriented teaching. Earlier, all students are just behind to earn a piece of paper, that is degree. Whether those skills are really learned or not, that is again the question mark. When they are actually going to the field, then they are learning the things. Here industries are claiming clearly that we are not getting the students who are ready to use. Here we have done one project with my earlier institute where we have tied up with one of the NBFCs. They have started grooming the students. After the first semester, they have hired our 3 students. Throughout the year, they have moved to the different parts, and finally they have taken or selected one. In this entire process, the students has learned across all the domains. Company came to know about all the facets of the student, and out of that, they have selected one. 2 of them, they have given the certificate, and 2 of them, they have got it plus even more higher salary than whatever that company has offered. Now, this is more on the outcome-oriented. What orientation? Now, as you said that placement is required, but are you really prepared for that or not? So it is more on interdisciplinary problem-solving approaches, that as ma'am has very clearly said, the universities need to address the local problems. And those problems and those structures need to be established for the interdisciplinary. So the goal will be to prepare the faculty to design curricula that align to the real-world challenges. So that's what I have just said, that with IIT Mumbai, we are tied up with one program where IIT Mumbai faculties are teaching the local problems and making students and faculties learn out of that. Then global collaboration and academic mobility. Now, as we are holding this particular conference, but global mobility has already started. Faculties are coming from the foreign countries to India to teach or for this kind of conferences. Our faculties are going. Joint collaborations have started. Joint research has started. So these all are things are started. So it is more on the network driven. Still, majority of the faculty, they even don't know how to use LinkedIn. Probably, practically, majority of the faculties, they are using LinkedIn as a platform of the Facebook or promotion of themselves. So how you can connect, network, and how you can get a good research. Because if we all are going to tie up with certain contextual transnational things we are talking, the context or if comparison of the Indian context teaching or foreign context teaching, the two faculties can collaborate well with each other and develop those things. So the emphasis will not be on the mobility alone, but the meaningful academic partnerships that enhance the institutional goal. Additionally, there will be the growing focus on faculty, academic leader, and change agents. Faculties are really change agents if they are really getting themselves involved with the students. Now, mentoring, counseling, these things are there. But in our India, if you all are probably when we all are grown up, probably do remember our childhood teacher's name. Because that way we have been mentored by them. But today, if you all are going to ask our students that who has been taught them in 11th and 12th, probably very few of them, they are able to know their names. So, importantly, the future model will be continuous, data-driven, and impact-focused. Faculty development will no longer be measured on the number of programs offered or conducted, but its contribution to the students' learning outcomes, institutional quality, and global competitiveness. We are preparing students to compete globally. So in conclusion, faculty development in the TNE era will leave the support function to the strategic lever, shaping not only how the faculty teach, but how institutions transform in a globally connected yet locally grounded higher education ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think your point on digital and hybrid learning and how faculty, how you said about the technology is available, but how faculty needs to be trained to use the technology very effectively. So giving one more example is where we use technology very widely, even at our school level. We have K-12 schools under the banner of Symbiosis, and we have, the interactive board, the census board that we've put up in every classroom. But it was very imperative for us to train our faculties to use the census board. So sometimes a child from the 6th grade and the 7th grade was, it was very easy for him to actually use the interactive board compared to the teacher who was teaching him. So it was very important for us to actually train every teacher on how to use these interactive boards very effectively.
Just on that. Probably for all these things, the attitude and mindset of faculty is required. That if I have to teach the students now today with event of this information burst, all information is available. And faculty, if they are not going to give the additional information, if they are not going to prepare themselves.
My next question is to Dr. Gayatri. Given India's diverse socio-economic landscape, do you see a risk that transnational education could create a perception divide in employability between students who have access to this and to students who do not have access to this? So do employers just look at the degree? Because that was one of the discussions in one of the panels yesterday, that will there be enough importance given to skills and knowledge or just the degree that the students gain?
I've been thinking a lot about this question, but I'll address it from the fact, from the population I know. And let's just go back a little bit, right? Employability is why anybody gets educated. So nobody gets educated for the sake of knowledge, largely, So I'd say about 99% of us want to earn, and that's for why we get educated. So if you sort of go back in time, why are so many Indians still wanting government jobs? Because, I mean, I come from a Babu family, so I can safely say it. Somebody 3 generations back was a Babu. Today, me sitting here has a house, has a car, so wow, good. Social security available, future taken care of. Then the next generation went into IT, simply because again they saw a way out of the current, sort of middling that one could get into. So employability is always going to be about salaries. Employability is always going to be about wages. The challenge, I think, is what this means so I'm sort of, skirting around the transnational education really as to how do the poor see it. So if you look at it, a lot of them are going to Germany, a lot of them are going and taking degrees with various community colleges, Canada, US, Australia, etc., because they see that as a way out. They've gone into some of the Eastern European countries, Russia, etc., where actually most of them are going as workers. They're not going as education, and that I think is dangerous for India. So Indians outside, the perception of Indians outside is engineers, doctors, affluent. Sorry, Ravin, I don't know whether you have it or not, but it's the BMW that you would have or the Porsche that you'll have. That's the Indian dream, right? And that's the, it's the Shah Rukh Khan dream that you've sold there. Now you come back and there you go and you're a truck driver and you've actually signed up for an education. And the disappointment there is going to be tremendous. And that's going to again affect. So there are 2 parts of it, right? One is, what is India representing outside India? So who are we? I think that question will change very shortly. The second, and this is on the back of education. Earlier they were going as workers and skilled workers and unskilled workers, but now they're going on the back of education. So that also is something one should address as Indians, we should be worried about. The other that I would say is, undoubtedly there is a caste system in education, right? It's a class and a caste system, and because education, as you rightly said, Matt, is market, it has to be paid for. But for research to happen, for innovation to happen, etc., there is a price to be paid. And who pays that price, I think, will make a lot of difference. Universities, pardon me for saying it, I mean, Symbiosis is doing a great job, but how can I expect? I mean, there is corruption, but that also can be a solution that one has to have, right? What transparency? I don't know. There are multiple layering to this whole thing. So the layering which has to be there is who pays the price. How much is state? How much is parents? How much is the university as a company, as an enterprise, right? Those are very important financial decisions which will determine culture in a sense. Culture is not outside money. So student is employability, university is money. So if we, put this, it's a lovely marriage to happen. So that marriage is a tough one to take forward, and therefore I strongly believe that one should look at the economics as one is actually designing for good outcomes. Because economics in the end beats everything else.
Thank you. I think your point on what is India representing itself to the outside world is something that we all as academicians and researchers need to think about. My next question is to Ravin. As someone deeply involved in cross-border business across India, Europe and Australia, do you see India as a global talent hub? And what role can transnational education play in strengthening that position? We had discussions on this even during the roundtable, where there were questions raised as to, can India be the destination for these IBCs, and can it be portrayed as a hub for global talent? So my question to you.
Thanks, Amrita. That's a good question. And aside to tease Gayatri again on the education being a class system, it is the same everywhere in the world. Even if you look at the US, right? If you go to an Ivy League and then you look at all the students from the other universities, they are a class apart. The quality of education that you get in the Ivy League and the amount of money you pay as a result for it not only sets you up with networking and the alumni who get you great jobs, but the quality of thinking that comes from it actually guarantees incredible success, and that's reflected in India as well when you look at the IITs, IIMs, Symbiosis. So Amrita, on your question, it's a hard one. You know, I spent a lot of time thinking about it, and I'll tell you what I wrote, and then I'll tell you what spurred in my mind as I was writing it, right? So the short answer is yes, I think that India can emerge as a global talent hub in many sectors it is already, right? But is that status at risk, which is the challenge I'm going to put to the room? The fundamentals for us in India are powerful. We have scale above anyone else. We still have English capability, and so long as the government does not mess that up to their best efforts, that will make us globally competitive. We have entrepreneurial energy in India. Everybody's an entrepreneur, right down to the rickshaw driver. There's a huge digital ambition and skill set, and we have a young workforce, which will stay that way for at least the next 25 years. But scale is not adequate. The real question is whether we can convert this demographic advantage to globally deployable talent, and that's where India will struggle a bit. Many of our cultures are inflexible. We do not like to take in inputs of the way of thinking of different cultures, and to be globally accepted or globally deployable, you have to be able to play the gray and mix in with other cultures very quickly. We cannot be very rabid about how we want to see the world through our prism, because the world sees us through their prism, and we have to see it both ways. That's where transnational education perhaps can play an important role, because it brings together the global curriculum, international faculty, perhaps research linkages, and an industry-aligned style of education, which if you mix with India's scale might do well. India sends 1.3 million students a year overseas, right, every year, and 50,000 international students come to India. So, you know, that's a, you know, let that number sink in, that's huge. Australia's population is 23 million, right? 5% of Australia's population goes away for education from India every year. So for me, transnational education is not about prestige or foreign branding at all. It's about actually, as Amrita said, it's about creating graduates who are globally credible but locally grounded. But here's the thing that went through my head as I wrote this. I met the principal of the Coady International School 2 months ago. It used to be one of India's best schools, American education. And then I also met the dean of Deakin University. And I asked the same question: what is your biggest challenge in the latest world? And AI proved to be the biggest challenge for both the school, the high school, and the college and the university, right? Because you have students today who have access to information which is greater than the lecturer. The student is an expert even in grade 5 on the context, whether you want to talk about the French Revolution or whether you want to talk about how AI writes code, because they've done their research, and the lecturer can be redundant in this context unless the lecturer is now evolving from telling you what the textbook is doing to being the streetlight on your journey of life. And if we do not change our philosophy in education in this era of incredible disruption, then you're not going to be creating graduates who are globally employable, because everything is being disrupted right in front of our very eyes, not just with AI, but also with geopolitics. So the context of India here is at risk, because why did we get a great software industry? It's because software needs exactly what we wrote. Study it, regurgitate it, and then go to university, and you're regurgitating that code, right? There is no flexibility, and therefore it played to the Indian strength or made the weakness the strength. Today with AI, that is not going to work. You're going to have to ask why. You're going to have to find out how this thing works. You're going to have to do it yourself. Each CEO who uses AI for the application context in his or her company does so differently, because each company is a different animal, and AI will give you advantages differently. So you can't just go to SAP and get an SAP system and use it. You have to develop it yourself for your context. And therein lies the two biggest weaknesses for India. One is our inflexibility in culture, because we really want everything to fit inside our box, whatever that box is. And if we want to be globally deployable, we have to be incredibly flexible. Our system doesn't teach us that. Our cultural context doesn't teach us that. Our families don't teach us that, right? We even get married within the community. Everything reaffirms rigidity. And this world needs the opposite. And secondly, our education system designs for that rigidity. And we have, in the context of AI today, a very different world. And so we can be that hub, but it needs a major switch in our thinking.
I think what you spoke about young workforce is what also Dr. Kaustubh yesterday spoke at the inaugural, where India has the youngest, is the youngest nation and Maharashtra is the youngest state. But I think to be globally employable and locally grounded is something that is important. I think we have about 15 minutes, so we would like to open the forum to the audience. Introduce yourselves and also mention to whom the question is directed to. We have a few hands going up here.
Good morning to all. My name is Avijit Pathak. So my question to the entire desk, if courses are market driven, so it is evident some courses will overshadow other discipline and gradually those courses will become less relevant. For say humanities courses don't generate ample job prospectus at graduation level in India. So how foreign university make student jobs ready with respect to those courses in their countries? And what changes you can bring to make those courses relevant again in India?
So, thank you for that question. At the University of York, with our launch programs, we are launching with 6 bachelor's degrees and 3 master's degrees. Most of the courses are what everyone will call market-driven, so across business, economics, and computer science, finance, etc. We have one program called the Business of Creative Industries. I was personally extremely excited about that. What that does is brings together the creative economy, creative industries with business and technology. And the first sort of course and modules are about, how do you understand business in the context of culture? To me personally, that was extremely exciting. I thought there'd be a massive response and understanding. India is a great hub for creative economies. We have the Orange Economy Plan, etc. But what do you think? Is that the most popular course? No. Because the understanding is that if we do business, economics, computer science, that's where we're going to get the better jobs. However, what is the response from potential partners, employers, etc.? They are most excited about it, and they cannot wait to employ graduates who come out of this. Because it is a course where we are able to bring together that understanding of business, creative industries, and technology, which is rare. And so here you've got a situation where we're very good at have a great track record of doing this in York. We're bringing that to India. We've got great faculty on board already who truly understand and are excited to deliver this. And we've got employers ready to take in students. Are the students interested? So our role as an institution is to be able to build the understanding of what this is, why it's important, and to communicate appropriately, and that's what we're working on at the moment. So I think it's also about the market, as it were, developing. So I think the branch campus industry or situation is about bringing about, there are several changes that we've talked about that this whole ecosystem will drive. And one of them, I hope, is the understanding and the engagement of the market with what this brings. But of course, the onus is on us as enterprises to actually be able to deliver that or drive that understanding.
Hi, Sanmitra from BITS Pilani, BITS Design here. I have been a part since the round table, and this is a comment plus question that I want to ask the dais, and I hope this will also lead to comment with the people who are present here. We're talking about technology, sciences, finance, but if we look at it, yes, you did speak about the humanity structure, but design and AI is also taking up a lot of space. And that is where maybe we can have a look and we can see where we can have TNE added in. But my question here is, if we are talking of faculty development programs like Sir mentioned, are we also looking at PhD in a different way through NEP? Do we have a multiple entry exit in PhD? I don't think that's working right now. A person who gets into the PhD simply loses life for some time and then comes back. And then, I'm sorry. I know it's sitting now. I'm sorry I made that. But yeah, it is the truth. And then where is that learning that keeps happening, and then you do your research and the faculty development where the person who wants to teach gets to learn, gets to teach, gets to live a life. That doesn't exist as of now, at least not here. And this is where I want to plead to everyone here is, through TNE, can we try to achieve this? Can we try to see that a person completes 2 years here, possibly, like we have a 2+2, 3+1 for our graduations and postgrads. Can we look at that as an option? This question is for the whole dais, please. Thank you.
Let me take this a little bit personally, okay? See, when I did my PhD, and as you can see, I'm not an academic. I don't think I was suited to it. I had a very interesting supervisor, and I consciously call him that, he actually told me that you're going to make a really bad researcher because I don't have patience, you see. So one of the things he said is, go live in this village for 3 years. Tell me what problem you will solve. And I was like an oxymoron, right? I did economics in undergrad, social work in a master's, because I was finding my way, whatever. But the point I'm making is, what was interesting is, I set up the first social enterprise there. So a PhD need not be a place where one does not do anything else. I think that itself needs to be debunked. It is a time when one has time to experiment. I don't know how much flexibility we have there. And the interesting thing is, I just studied 28 women. After that, when I was supposed to submit it, the university told me, where's the table? Your base degree is economics. I said, on 28 women, what do you want me to do? Analysis. I can talk to you about them. Why do you need me to write it? But the evaluation was at fault. I also want to address the other question. I know it's not completely relevant, but subjects will become irrelevant over time. That's the nature of the beast, right? As decades go, every 20 years things become irrelevant. But to me, today's capstone is ethnography. You're asking people to get immersed. So ethnography had to change. That means as people who are there, and I'm a firm believer that what we're asking people for immersive education, going there is actually the new form of ethnography. Similarly, languages, one will have to change. Google Translate does 80% of the work. We dislike it. But you know what? I use it every day when I'm going to different places. So we've got to look at things differently. So I would agree on the fact that disciplines may have to also move forward. And now I'm going to take you on, Ravin. It was your turn for the last 2 times, but the interesting thing is for us to really lose rigidity. Not only as a culture, as education too, we need to lose rigidity and just be open. Our students will become more employable, I strictly believe, if faculty make it fun. Evaluation cannot be all fun, but teaching needn't be boring.
So just like to add, probably when you talk about PhD, how many of are really interested in doing PhD, unless and until it is not made mandatory for your promotion, or very, very few of them are there who are really interested and done their PhD in their own domain. Majority of them, they have done their PhD just for the sake of, as I mentioned earlier, is degree. Now, when we are taking it as a sake of degree, there is no point in learning something new. It is just prepare one thesis with connections and everything, get your degree, that's all. But when you are doing the PhD in your own things, when the research, they have said, when I have done my PhD at a very young age, the topic which I have chosen is specifically with my field. And I immersed myself in that field so much that I can claim it very clearly what are the do's and don'ts within my fields. Probably this is very real. Now we are talking about multiple entry exit. Now unlike your conventional 3 years degree, there you are going to have, if you are not qualifying in 3 years, you are going to have the tag of fail or pass. Here for PhD you are getting 5 + 2 years and plus 1 grace years, 8 years are there. Now how to utilize it, whether you want to have the multiple entry exit is another thing. But you have got ample of time to immerse yourself, do proper research, and then come out. So with NEP, probably for PhD also, there will be some changes maybe taking place. And slowly and steadily, these things are going to be happening. Thank you.
I don't even know where to start with all of this. Your exciting question, your exciting response, your exciting response. But one of the things that is so exciting and beautiful about India in general that I've experienced over time is that people love to tell stories. People love to tell stories. They can tell them forever, right? Such long and exciting stories, but for whatever reason, they're almost always interesting. However, when it relates to thinking about doing research, I work with some of my colleagues and all they want to do is table, 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 and maybe one line of explanation. So I would urge people that, numbers are important. I'm not a quantitative person, but there should be, like you said, in a different way I'm saying it, but more investment in telling those narratives and stories, right? But really investing in the rigor of qualitative understandings of things are so important. And with what we're talking about, with thinking about branch campuses, and particularly with Amruta, with all of your questions and leading this discussion, right? How are we supposed to know how to do this work well unless we actually talk to stakeholders, community members, potential students, recent graduates, and really understand their stories to solve and work on the problems they find valuable? That's one of the reasons why I think a PhD is such an exciting adventure, even though in a way you're sucked out of the world in a way. But like I mentioned earlier, part of the investment in taking more time, it's like we want to finish, right? But spending that time and learning how to become a good critical thinker and then connecting with our other colleagues in this room that are policymakers and administrators is really the excitement of really building teams. And this is one thing that is very exciting to me about this conference, is that there are people from different streams, different ways of thinking, different workspaces. The more that we can consider how we work together, your PhD will be much more worth it in that way.
Sorry, I'm just going to make one more point. It's also the money. See, I don't know what it is today, but when I was doing my PhD, you're paying 1,200, and every one of my classmates was making 13,000, right? So that makes a hell of a difference of why you feel the loss in years. So I come back to it, our education is well paid. Who dreams of being a professor or a teacher is because of also, you dream of it because it's security. More women opt for it because, I'm just saying it khara khara, as you say, in black and white, is because, it balances your childcare responsibilities. Because our men are yet not taking care of our children, right? So we do have a technical problem there. So I think these are also factors which are pulling us down. So I think we need to look at it holistically. Are we able to do it? And by no means do I agree. I agree to you that, you do it because you want to be, want to go up the promotion. But I think the PhD can be a fun time. But what is the result also one needs to see, right? And money matters. I come back to that. We shouldn't have these discussions outside employability, whether it's of the faculty or of the students.
Just to sum up, I think it's been a very exciting panel. We've had discussions on how students need to culturally adapt and students need to go from performance to participation, teacher-led to student-led. Matthew spoke about, we need to do deep thinking on what is higher education per se for a diverse country like India. Then we went on to faculty training programs, that how assessments need to change. Teachers need to be trained to use technology more effectively, and how transnational education not only depends on student readiness, but also on faculty responsiveness and faculty readiness and flexibility. And of course, our most important topic was employability outcomes, where Gayatri and Ravin spoke to us about how we need to think globally, but act locally and design. And universities need to design curriculums that are place-based, that will provide place-based solutions. And Ravin also spoke about emphasis on curiosity and AI, and how our education system, our students, our faculty need to be more flexible, need to lose rigidity and thereby can really lead to the success of transnational education. I hope this panel has been as engaging and as insightful as it was for all of us, for the audience too. In case you all want to meet with these panel members, they will be available after this session. So please feel free to reach out to them in case you all have more questions. But thank you so much. Over to the MC.
Thank you for that wonderful, wonderful panel. Great deliberations. Thank you so much. I now invite Dr. Bhama Venkataramani, former Dean Academics and Administration of SIU, to kindly felicitate our speakers and moderator. Ma'am.